to go to the community development program. If you're okay,
Yep, I'm
Mr.
good.
Bullman? Great. And I'd like to actually have a look at, as you would recall, the previous minister's announcement of the 1,000 subsidised jobs in March 2019. So I'm interested in hearing how CDP numbers are tracking, firstly, since the suspension of all participation and penalty requirements from March until October last year. Have CDP participants re-engaged with the program, Mr. Bullman?
Thanks, Senator. Yes. Over the last 12 months, CDP's had, like other employment services, had a large increase in the number of job seekers that have come onto the program. And we've had an increase of 10,343 job seekers enter into the program, bringing the total up to 42,263 job seekers in CDP.
Sorry, 42,000?
263 job seekers.
And that's from 33,000, isn't it? Is it roughly around that?
Roughly around 33, 35, depending on the point in time. But the main point being a 32% or 10,343.
And what was that time frame? Was it in
from
that
29 February 2020.
Yep. To...
Sorry, that's the caseload as at 29 February 2020.
So from 29th of Feb you had 42,263?
Chloe Bird, CDP Strategy Branch.
Thank you, Ms. Bird.
So the timeline is the increase was from the caseload at the 29th of February 2020 compared with the caseload as at the 28th of February 2021. So the caseload at February 2021 was 42,263 job seekers.
So the 12-month period from this February to last February.
42,263, Ms. Bird, is that, sorry?
That's correct.
Yep. Okay. So in that 12-month period, and is that across the board or just in particular regions in terms of the 10,000, extra 10,000?
Look, we see it across, there's been some growth across the board. Some regions there hasn't been any growth, but in a handful of regions, half a dozen regions, there's been significant growth.
Could you identify those, please, Mr. Bullman? When you say no growth, which regions are they?
Across 60 regions, some of our most remote regions didn't see too large a growth or any at all.
Mr. Bullman, I'd like specifics, thank you,
okay,
because that is a
through.
Huge number in unemployment. So could we get that down, please?
Can we give that to you on notice, Senator? Or is that?
Oh, I think Ms. Bird's got it there.
It is a long list. I do have some comparable figures if we...
Yeah.
Would you be able to table that, Ms. Bird?
I don't think I've got it in a form that I'd be able to table, but I can table it after.
Okay, thank you. So could you, just looking at that list though, Ms. Bird, and I will go with you on this, could you just at least identify the area where the largest amount of people were taken in those areas that Mr. Bullman was referring to in terms of the increase?
Certainly, Senator, and I think just to clarify how the data works, the 10,000 is counting a point in time to a point of time. There's obviously fluctuations as people come on and off the caseload, so it's taking a comparison between one point in time and another point in time.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but
Yes.
It's just that Mr. Bullman said there were some areas that had none.
That's true.
So,
for example, and as Mr. Bullman said, there are 60 regions, but I can run through those that don't have any, if that's what you prefer.
So when you say 60 regions, that's 60 regions for the total of the 42,263?
That's right. So the CDP operates across 60 regions in remote Australia, and that's the total caseload across all of those regions.
So the regions didn't increase, it remained the same?
So, for instance, in Christmas and Cocos Islands, there hasn't been an appreciable increase. So in terms of percentage points, it's been a 0% increase. Sorry, hang on, I'm looking at the wrong column. Yes, sorry, I was just looking at the proportions. So if I go through, we can go to just working down. Christmas and Cocos Islands had a 35% increase between the 29th of February 2020 and the 28th of February 2021.
So they have...
Their caseload is very, very small, though, in context. So that's, they started with a caseload of 68 and finished with a caseload of 92. So it's an increase of 24 people. So the percentages may be misleading depending on the numbers of overall caseload that we're talking through.
Okay, so the other areas... could you just identify with that? I know you're going to table it, but where has the biggest jumps been on the
some of the biggest jumps have been those that are closer to more functioning labour markets. So, for instance, in the Darwin-Daly region in the Northern Territory, we did see a 93% increase. So that was an addition of 899 people to the caseload.
899 people
to their caseload in that region, yes.
So what was it prior to that?
Prior, at the same point in time last year, there were 906. Hang on.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There were 967 people. So it was 1,866 people at the 28th of February, which was an increase of 899 people.
Okay. And where were they predominantly? Focused around Darwin, Greater Darwin area?
So the Darwin-Daly region, that's region 35 in our CDP area.
So the border of CDP, I think, starts out just beyond Palmerston and goes down into the Daly region area.
So not Greater Darwin itself?
Greater Darwin is serviced under the Mainstream Job Active program.
Okay. Is that a concern to see such an increase?
Well, certainly, I would say that in that particular case, for example, it is quite close, as I said, to the Darwin City area, which is a fairly functioning labour market. In the context of COVID, we did see through shutdowns and needing to respond to the COVID crisis that there were a series of job losses, and that if you consider the remote economy is generally less functioning labour markets, I think it makes some sense that where they were closer to those employment impacts that we would see those sort of increases. Those, I think, to be clear, those are people who may have come to the CDP program. Anecdotally, we know the number of people left cities and regional areas to go back to homelands and to go back to their communities because they knew that there may be higher risk, for instance, of COVID transmission in some of the centres. So we may have seen some people transferring from Job Active and other employment services into CDP, so they may not have been new to unemployment, they may have been moving back to community at that point in time. And of course there will be people who have lost jobs and come onto the caseload as well.
I'll come to that in a moment, Ms Bird. So of the 10,343, not including Christmas and Cocos, how many would be First Nations people?
Of that total increase of 10,343 job seekers, let me just see if I've got the breakdown. So I can tell you overall, the program, we have 33,848 people who are Indigenous on the caseload at the moment, so that's 80% of our current caseload. And compared with what the proportion of the caseload who identified as Indigenous at the 29th of February, it was 85% at that point. So we've seen a shift in the proportion of Indigenous people on the caseload since February.
5%?
Reduction. 5%.
A reduction.
So are we seeing more non-Indigenous people come on CDP? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, Senator.
Yes,
Through
during the
that period.
COVID period.
So that would be in that 10,343 cohort?
That's correct, noting that it's a point in time to a point in time.
Can you give a percentage? Would that be, if there's 5% decrease, what would we be talking about in terms of non-Indigenous people who've been forced onto CDP?
We'll get you the exact detail.
Indigenous people.
I recall it being somewhere in the 30-odd% region.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
But we'll get you the
I'd like
exact
to get it at
details.
the exact point in time, though, to make sure the data's comparable.
We can have it.
So you take that question on notice,
Yes,
Ms Bird?
Sorry,
Okay.
yes, I'll take that question on notice and get back to you.
All right, so And is this, in terms of the support for the extra 10,343 in the program, will that continue
Yes.
Yes.
until...
It's a demand-driven
there's no-
program, so we support people as they come onto the program.
Right, so they'll stay on it.
Well, we would hope that they would shift into employment opportunities.
But there's no
obviously,
time
but-
frame, is what I mean.
So, when the job seekers on income support and they're activity tested, meaning that they have to participate in our employment programs, then they'll stay on CDP until they become employed.
And they may be employed and still eligible for income support,
Yeah.
obviously.
Do you, with the workers who've come on or with the participants who've come on in that 12-month period, does the department monitor where they've actually come from? You mentioned job losses. Is there an indication as to where they may have come from in terms of the loss of a job?
So we can certainly do some more specific and detailed data analysis of how long the person might have been unemployed, for example, whether they've been in a previous program before, but being able to know precisely, what their specific employment situation was before, we have to dig quite a little bit deeper into that. But at the aggregate level, we can look at some of that information.
Have you seen that before? Like that's such a huge number of participants that have come on in a very short time. Is that an indication of the fact that people have lost jobs across the country, that you've seen them come onto the CDP program?
So the growth in the program hasn't been as large as a proportion as, say, the growth in the Job Active program, the mainstream, which makes sense. It's incredibly unfortunate, but it makes sense in the Job Active program given the labour markets they.
But it's a massive injection for CDP.
It is a really large growth. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And in those areas where there were, in those regions where there have been more functioning labour markets, so to go to your question, do we know what job they lost? We don't hold the data for that, nor does Social Security. But what our job service providers will be doing as the person comes in the door, they say, I've lost my job in the cafe in the Darwin Daly region, because the cafe closed down or has gone into hibernation for a period. The job service provider will sit there with them. They'll work up a job plan with that participant, say, okay, while you're looking for work, we can do this. We can help you with your resume, with some skills training, with some other support. What we're hoping to see is as businesses start to come out of that hibernation period, cafes, tourism, other things, job seekers will flow back in. This month, or actually I think it was last month, I saw for the first time the caseload starting to go down a trickle, 500 odd less job seekers on the caseload than the month before. So, which is it's incredibly early, but sort of reflects where the broader labour market in Australia is going. Jobs are starting to open back up again. Business is starting to run. People are starting to enter in. So it's very hard for us to predict for anyone, I think, in the country. It's a very unique period. But there's some just little glimmers of positive signs around those areas where there are more healthy labour markets. In our very remote areas, for example, I think if you look at Maningrida region, there was very little increase in job seekers, if any, or change. And that sort of reflects the nature of the number of businesses there.
I've been asking questions around CDP for, over 5 years almost, and I've never seen an increase of this amount in terms of the workforce. Does the department have the financial capability to keep this amount of people on CDP and those organisations resourced adequately?
Yes, Senator, it's a demand-driven program. We will always service those people that come in on income support and get referred to a CDP program. You're absolutely right, though, even under CDEP or earlier iterations of the remote jobs program, the caseload usually sits around the 35,000, ups and downs as people turn 18 or people move into old age pension. So it's very unique, the same as it was very unique in the mainstream programs, but we're funded for it. We're supporting these job seekers thoroughly. We're working with our service providers.
Okay.